Hi guys, welcome back to the Joyful Investors channel. How much money do we need to start investing? This is one of the most common questions posted by people who are looking to start investing. But very often, the emphasis is placed on the wrong issue as amateur investors worry about what is the correct minimum amount of money they need in order to start investing. But let me share with you, instead of being overly concerned about what is the correct amount of money to start with, the core focus should be on whether you have allocated your money in a sensible way such that you have put aside a portion of the money for investing purposes while being able to fulfill your other financial obligations. An easy way to see this is that you're actually working backwards to determine how much you can possibly invest based on the finances you have. The concept of minimum capital is non-existent. The starting capital of an investment can range from a modest sum of a few $100s or a few $1,000s to a hefty sum, depending on your current finances level. A young investor may only be able to fork out a few $100s or a few $1,000s to start with, while a full-time employed investor can possibly fork out more. So there is really no minimum capital that's required or the best amount of money that you need to have in order to start investing. You start with what you can afford to and start to grow your money no matter how small it is. Because what is important is that you start investing earlier. The earlier you start, the more prominent the compounding effect will be. And there is a better prospect of growing your money by investing rather than just leaving it in the bank account, as what we have shared in our previous video. Knowing how to save before learning how to invest. Other than time, an even more important factor is whether you even know how to save. Well, some of you may be thinking, what am I talking about? Who doesn't know how to save? Well, saving may be easy for you, but not for everyone, because it involves sticking to a disciplined plan. If you really want to have a feel of the amount, my personal view is to have at least $6,000 of savings before you start to invest. So why $6,000? This is approximately 6 months worth of expenses saved for the rainy days. But to take note, this $6,000 is really just a rough guide for people who have just started working and saving up. So if you are someone who has already worked for a few years, then this amount is definitely not a good gauge for you. Because as you continue to work to grow a steady stream of income, your amount of savings should gradually grow bigger. There can possibly be two reasons if you do not have at least $6,000 of savings right now. Either that you have just started working and saving up, or that you have not been saving much of your money over the past few years. And in both situations, you should first learn how to save even before moving on to doing investments. Because this will help us to create a healthy financial position so that we can invest with a greater peace of mind. There are tons of videos out there sharing with investors on how to get started with just $1,000 or a few $100s. While it is definitely true that we can start investing with that amount of money, the bigger question to ask ourselves is that, are we financially ready to get started with investing if that is all we have? The key to investing is staying disciplined. So if you cannot even be disciplined to save up, then this may pose to be an even bigger issue when it comes to investing. The path to investment can be summed up using the SPEED acronym. S stands for steady source of income, P, present financial obligations, E, events in the pipeline, the next E, emergency funds, and D, develop an investment plan. The first step to investment is ensure that you have a steady source of income. This steady source of income can be derived from your employment with a company or as a self-employed entrepreneur. A steady source of income ensures that you have the finances required to pay for your expenses, to save, and to invest. The P stands for present financial obligations. We should ensure that after settling all of our present financial obligations, such as credit card bills and transport expenses, there is leftover money available to be saved, invested, or for both. E stands for events in the pipeline. This is another important step to plan for the potential expenses required for any upcoming events or changes in life, such as getting married or getting a BTO flat. This category may potentially reduce the savings of finances considerably and thus reduce the amount available for investment purposes. The next E stands for emergency funds. Set aside sufficient funds as emergency funds. We will cover more about how much to set aside in the later part of our video. Lastly, D stands for developing an investment plan. The investment plan should cover learning the basics of investing, performing detailed research, as well as setting the appropriate expectations for your investments. If you look at the path to investment, the next part of our video is focusing on the S, P, E, E so that we can eventually move on to the D. So if you have been maintaining disciplined spendings and savings habits, how much of your monthly salary should you allocate to do investing? Focus on the proportion of your monthly salary to allocate to the investments. You see, people invest to grow their money, and this can be for their retirement goals or to have a more extravagant and indulgent lifestyle. But even before you invest for those goals, you should ensure that investing does not hinder your current life. An intelligent investor has a plan in mind. He ensures that he works on an allocation plan that properly allocates a certain percentage of his monthly salary to spendings, savings, and investments. And this can be achieved through the following steps. Step 1. Deduce the average monthly expenses based on historical spending patterns. The average monthly expenses should cover both the basic indispensable expenses and the discretionary expenses. Basic expenses form the minimum level of expenses that are necessary. So this includes expenses on food, utilities, transport, and healthcare costs. On the other hand, discretionary expenses are expenses that are incurred to satisfy human wants. So for this category of expenses, we should always impose an expenditure cap to limit how much we can afford to splurge on to satisfy our desires. The first step to good personal financial planning is to start keeping track of your daily expenditure. Step 2. Evaluate whether the historical spending patterns are sustainable. Once we start keeping track of our daily expenses, we will then be able to assess whether our spending patterns are sustainable and aligned with our retirement goals. By setting and keeping to a disciplined budget, it facilitates and inculcates a sound habit leading to early retirement. Have you heard of this 50-30-20 rule? It is a very popular rule that was first made famous by Elizabeth Warren in her book, All Your Worth, The Ultimate Lifetime Money Plan. So the original rule reinforces the idea of spending just 50% of your after-tax income on your needs, 30% on your wants, and the remaining 20% into the savings or for investment purposes. As the years went by, people soon created variations to the rule to best fit their lifestyle. So what about the joyful investors? As a general guide, you may consider apportioning 50% of the take-home salary for the non-discretionary and discretionary expenses, while investing 30% and saving the remaining 20% in the bank. Afraid that you may overspend on unnecessary items? Within the 50% portion, you can then further set out a proportion split for the discretionary and non-discretionary spending based on your preference. The 20% component that goes into our savings is known as the emergency funds. Emergency funds are funds saved for the rainy days or for unexpected events such as an unforeseen medical incident or sudden loss of job. The rule of thumb is to ensure that you have at least 6 months worth of expenses maintained in the form of liquid cash. So if we follow this reasoning and our 50-30-20 rule, then we should be able to accumulate our emergency funds within 1.25 years. So what happens after you have saved up sufficiently for your emergency funds? Do you continue with the 50-30-20 rule, or should you reallocate the money to increase the proportion to investments? Well, it is really up to you because this is up to each individual's preference and comfort level. You can choose to continue with the 50-30-20 allocation proportion, or you can also choose to increase the proportion slightly for your investments. Step 3. Revisit your allocation plan regularly. The 50-30-20 rule is not a stagnant plan. It is very flexible to be adapted to suit your lifestyle or your current stage of life. So if, for example, you are newlywed, you may want to increase the 50% spendings component while reducing the 30% investment component, because you may have to spend on expenses such as renovating a new home or to hold your wedding ceremony. But as you reach into, say, the 10th or 15th year of your marriage, you may find it easier to allocate more money into the investment component, as you have already spent most of the hefty expenses at the earlier stage of a marriage. So we've got to recognize that everyone's financial circumstances are different, but we should always seek to let our money work harder for us once we have lesser financial commitments. Realistically speaking, the proportion also depends on your income level, because it may not be easy for someone who is earning an income at a lower income bracket to only spend 50% of his monthly salary, because there's always this fixed amount of expenses that you've got to incur every month. And speaking of the same chain of thoughts, the marginal propensity to invest should also increase with increasing income levels. To sum up, the key lies not within whether you have hit the minimum capital level to start investing, but rather the core essence is whether you have a well thought out plan that puts your money to its best use. It is also important to stay disciplined and stick to your allocation plan that you have devised according to your lifestyle and your current stage of life. I hope today's video has been insightful for you, especially if you're looking to start investing. Do leave your comments and remember to hit the like and subscribe button. So see you in our next video.